In light of the PISA International Student Assessment Survey published this week, is it time to send our children to school in South Korea?
South Africa, you're going to say, in South Korea.
South Korea.
This was, of course, the view that the UK was way behind 20 or so other countries. Mary Beard, should we go to South Korea?
Well, I happen to have an ex-student who's currently teaching in a school in South Korea, and she emailed me a couple of days ago and said, "You don't know how difficult it is teaching a class of children who've always been taught that to ask a question was a weakness." Everything we see about the politicians being mesmerised by these PISA tables seems to me to be completely bonkers. And clearly you can learn some things. You can learn some things about micro differences between countries in the UK, for example. But if you actually imagine that Shanghai was a dream ticket for kids' education because they are doing well at these tests to which they have been very adequately taught, you would be mad. And I think that there's two problems here. I mean, I think one is there is no right way of educating kids. And if we could all realise that there wasn't a right answer, there are some ways we can do better than others, but there's not a single right way.
Is there a single wrong way?
There is nothing simple about how you educate kids, and there's no recipe for success. And I think also you have to see that there's almost no country in the world that doesn't somehow project its anxieties about itself onto how it educates its kids. So if we were to go to Shanghai, we would find people worrying about stress, overwork, kids at school for 12 hours a day, extra evening classes, weekends, no music, and we'd find people coming to the UK to say, so how do you do it in the UK? How do you get a bit more laid back? So I think the real key is just to say education is a very inexact science, and no single table, as we know from league tables, will actually give you the right answer to what's going to work.
So it should be Nick Ferrari.
Well, I'm greatly disheartened by someone as well-educated as you taking that stance. I would suggest there's a very simple reason that schools in Asia are overtaking and outstripping ours here in Britain. And it comes down to one word, and that word is competition. And the radio show, thank you, on the radio show that I present on LBC, we phoned 3 countries and asked about their schools. We phoned Malaysia, Singapore and Hong Kong. And in every single one of those countries, when a child enters a class, they know where they are in that class, whether they're 19th or whether they're 25th. The teachers work around and they try and bring them up. It is called competition. Guess what? As and when you go into the real world, and I look around, some of you are very, very young when you go to your first jobs, that is called competition. That was outlawed in this country by mostly Labour, not solely, by mostly Labour, left-wing, trendy educationists who said we could never compete for anything, no child could ever win a prize, don't worry if they can't spell, don't worry if they don't have any grammar, as long as they got it down on a piece of paper and they got the sentiment out, it was all right. What a load of cobblers, and we're reaping the price.
Okay. Danny Alexander. Number of people, keep your hands up and I'll come to you in a moment. Danny Alexander.
Well, I think I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 2 young children. I find these tables worrying, actually. I mean, you know, and particularly in the areas of maths and science, where we know that if, as a country, we want to succeed in the modern world, that educating people properly in maths and science, as well as the important arts subjects, but particularly those ones, you know, the author of these statistics, the academic at the OECD, says maths is the best protection against unemployment. And if you think about the industries where we're going to succeed as a country in the future, we need to improve our performance in these areas. And that's why I think it's so important that we make sure that we get rid of some of the disadvantages in our education system. For example, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds have for a long time done worse in our schools. That's why we're introducing a pupil premium. We've introduced a pupil premium to put more money in schools. It's like an idea that Nick Clegg has championed. That's why today I'm very proud that we've announced that we're going to fund free school meals for every child in the first. No, I'm sorry. You had your say. Let me finish.
An extra £150 million, which you hadn't budgeted, and you just say, "Oh, we'll find a shortfall." Where do you think you get the £150 million from? You tax all of us, and you just turn around and say, "We just need another 150 million."
Let me just finish the point. We absolutely right. The money comes from the taxes of people in this room and from money that the government has raised in many different ways. The point is that actually when kids have got a full stomach at school, they learn better. All the studies have been done show that actually with free school meals you get kids having a 20% advantage in terms of their educational achievement in those vital early years at school. And the truth is, as a country, we let our kids down in those first years of education and they never catch up again. That's why focusing on that age group, I think, is so important.
All right, let's hear from the person there. I'll come to you in a moment. Yes, the woman there on the back.
I think as well as mentioning South Korea, we've got to mention the fact that the kids in South Korea have got a much higher rate of suicide than in the UK or anywhere else. Yes, suicide rate for young children.
Exactly.
So this is as well something to mention.
So that you think, that they're overpressed? What do you think, sir, in the front here?
I think that education is clearly key to a competitive global economy, and I worry that this is the tip of the iceberg, these league tables, that will trickle down into our university system. You know, I've been to a place like Cambridge, and competition is key. Your rankings, every exam result, and it is very stressful, but everyone wants to come to these institutions and wants to come to the UK. I don't want to lose that external investment.
Rachel Reeves.
Look, I don't want my children to go to school in South Korea. I want my children to go to school in this country. But the results from the PISA league tables are a wake-up call to us. We do need to do better if we want to compete for jobs in the future. And the gentleman there says education is key to a successful economy. It's also key to successful people who live in that economy. And we are going to have to compete more in the future. But look, I went to my local state school in southeast London, and I got a fantastic education there, but it was also at a time when there were huge cuts to education budgets, and my sixth form was 2 prefab huts in the playground. There were never enough textbooks to go round, and that did hold people back. Now, we have seen huge transformation of schools in this country over the last 15 years, but we need to do better still, and we need to redouble our efforts, and I think the PISA results show that we have to do that. And that means
why are we 25th in maths? 23rd in reading, 21st in science. Why are we so low?
We have improved in all these areas, but other countries are leapfrogging and doing even better than us. So we do need to redouble our efforts. Now, that means having the best people teaching in our schools, and things like Teach First that got young people from the best universities into the classroom has made a big difference. But we're still really struggling to recruit enough good teachers in maths and science. And if we want to have kids who succeed in the future, we need to get the best people into some of those hardest schools, like we've done in Hackney and other areas in London, because that's going to be what makes a difference to young people in their lives.
Okay.
And, you know, it's fine for Mary to say that, you know, you've got to have creativity and all of those things, but also young people have got to leave school with those decent GCSEs if they're going to be able to get
jobs. All right, Mary, answer
There's
this.
absolutely no question, but to come back to PISA, what I wonder is how many people have looked at the kind of questions that are in these tests. You actually looked at the exam papers?
What does it matter? What does it matter? Because Britain comes 25th. What does it matter?
So let me give you one example.
Okay.
Not chosen at random, it's from the reading test. And it's a test which shows you a receipt from a camera shop. At the bottom of the receipt, it says, "Thank you for your custom." The question is, why do you think the shop put "thank you for your custom at the bottom of the receipt? The correct answer, for which you get full marks, is in order to build up a relationship with the customer. If you were to put, in order to show that the customer is valued, they would get no marks. Now, when you look through these questions, sometimes multiple choice, sometimes not, with the marking scheme, it's all available on the web, and you say these are the kind of questions that governments are using as accurate tests of how our kids are doing, I think that's crazy.
All right.
And it's not a wake-up call.
David Davis.
Well, I couldn't disagree with Mary more for a number of reasons. Firstly, of course, all these tests are rough and ready, and they're none of them perfect. But PISA and TIMSS and other surveys all show much the same thing. And one thing that they show over and over again is that the people who come top in these, the countries that come top in these tests, tend to be South Korea, Singapore, the various provinces of China. In other words, the people who are showing us a clean pair of heels in terms of the global economic competition. They're winning, and they're winning because their people are well educated. And in this country, and it exposes something which actually Boris referred to, although he got rather pilloried for it last week, and that is in this country...
Boris
Johnson.
Boris Johnson.
I'm in London, so I assumed everybody knew who I was talking about.
Yeah, but you're talking to the whole country. And
not
then
everyone's
Boris...
watching in London.
No. In Yorkshire, I'd have explained more, yes.
All right. Anyway, Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, said what?
But he sort of highlighted a point, which is that we have basically three classes of schools in this country. We have standard state schools, we have state grammar schools, and we have private schools. The private schools are as good as any in the world. The grammar schools mostly as good as any in the world. Some of the comprehensives are, but most of our state sector doesn't compete well enough. Well, this is what all these things are telling you. And it's letting down an entire generation.
Well, if
and it's been doing so for some time.
If you're selecting who goes to your school, of course you're going to get better results. If you're selecting on academic ability and parental income, it is easier to get good results. I think our state schools should be applauded for doing what they're doing with kids from all types of backgrounds, rather than saying that the private schools are so good.
All right, the woman there, I'll come to you down here. The woman there.
Do you not think that schools are focusing too much on getting the correct statistics rather than focusing on the pupils themselves?
Danny Alexander, you want to answer that point?
That's not my experience. I think that schools should focus on the performance of their pupils and on the well-being of their pupils too. But actually, I totally agree with what Rachel said. I went to my local comprehensive school in the Highlands of Scotland. I had a good education there. I think this argument that you should have an elitist education system, whether it's stratified by private schools or by grammar schools or whatever, is the wrong argument. Actually, if you go to countries like South Korea, you find that they've been able to develop a system that offers excellence in education for every child in that society. And the idea that we have to say, well, unfortunately, so many other schools aren't good enough, and therefore just going to have a few that are good, I think is a recipe for absolute disaster.
Now, Danny, nobody's arguing in favour of that. I'm saying that's one of the problems in our system. We have the most stratified country in the world virtually today. You look at the way our country runs. People starting from a working-class background have a very low chance of getting on in Britain today.
But that's
because of the education system.
And why the grammar schools are one of the greatest tools for social enabling this country has ever known. And the Conservative Party currently, it would be absolutely anathema to go back to them. And it is a fantastic opportunity for kids, regardless of how much money mum and dad have got in the bank, to have a great education. Right. They should be brought back tomorrow.
The woman in the fourth row there. That's you.
I would definitely say that I think the system is going through some issues as a result of mollycoddling for too many years.
Mollycoddling?
Yes.
Of the children?
Yes. When I went to school, we were placed on a ladder. You knew exactly where you were on the ladder. And when you went home at the end of the term and you told your parent that you were lost, you felt a level of shame. I don't believe it's right that children can graduate at 16, 17 years old without basic maths. And we think that, this is a system that we can adopt in today's day and age. It's completely wrong. And I think that the earlier that we start to address these issues from a very young age, the better it will be.
By making schools more competitive, in effect.
Definitely.
Yes. And the man at the back there. Yes, you, sir. Yeah, you.
Discipline structure, which is quite apparent in South Korea, isn't prevalent in our state schools here. With discipline structure comes success.
All right. And you, sir, in the second row, yes.
My mum's from Malaysia, and I've got cousins in Malaysia as well. And the kind of difference between them being taught in school and I was taught here is that also there's a culture within the families that kind of pushes them along. And, I mean, I went to independent school, so most of my mates were pushed by their parents because they were successful. But I see sometimes that some parents, I'm not saying all parents, but most of us don't, there's no sort of culture at home to kind of push them along as well. I don't know whether it's something that could be sort of worked upon as well, because I think sometimes the tables don't really show everything as well.
Are you saying that in Malaysia it's normal for children to be pushed much more than in this country?
Yeah, they have outside tutoring. Like all my cousins and nearly everyone in their class will, once they finish school, they'll go to another
Same thing
hour
happens
for tutoring.
here, doesn't it? I think yes, you sir here.
Yeah, why did both the Conservatives and the Labour Party, when they're in government, allow such grade inflation on GCSEs year after year, pretending that the population was getting more intelligent when it must be a lie when you've seen the things on the BBC. Why did you allow that? Because I was very fortunate to get through on O-levels just before GCSEs came behind. And I saw it degrade the A-levels, I saw it degrade the universities. Universities had to have an extra year. They lost a whole year. Now, why did the politicians allow that to happen? Just for your cheap political tricks. That's the future of the country you're talking about.
Right.
The generation
Rachel Reeves,
ahead.
do you want to answer this?
Look, I think the big challenge we've got in our education system today is not too many kids getting good results, but too many kids who aren't getting those decent GCSE results. And so I think we should, we should be concentrating on
his point. His point was they're not getting good results.
You make it sound like every kid is leaving school with straight A's, and the reality is we've still got 40% of kids who aren't leaving school with those decent
but
GCSEs.
year after year it went up.
Yes, and
they're not more intelligent.
He's right.
But there's better teaching. There's better teaching.
Right.
There's better teaching in schools. There's been
why
huge investment.
Why do they do the exams of years past and they have the same rate as before? Because you've just got higher grades.
Well, partly because different things matter.
And the future of the children matter. I don't take my children to school in the UK because of that.
Sir, you asked the question and I'm trying to give an answer. And if you today went and look at a GCSE paper in physics, in science, or in English literature for A-level or further maths, I bet you would struggle with a lot of those questions. I don't think they are simple questions, and I don't think we should devalue the achievements of our young people today, whether it's at GCSEs, whether it's GMVQs, A-levels, or their university degrees. Kids are working incredibly hard. We put huge investment into schools and into teacher training, and those things do lead to better results, and we should applaud
I did
that.
mechanical engineering, and the exams were tough. You had to remember the formulas before you actually had to go into the exam.
Well, maybe
they're not given on a plate, they're given multiple choice. It's just dumbed down.
Hang on, these kids can only take the exams that are put in front of them. Let's be fair. These children can only take the exams that are put in front of them, so we must applaud what they do. But you have to address the fact that, particularly under your government, every single year, supposedly the population got brighter, and it's simply not true. It doesn't happen anything else. Look at Manchester United. They're sinking like a stone. It doesn't always get better. That's the reality.
The woman there on the right. I'll take 2 or 3 more points, then we must go on. The woman in the stripe.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Mary and back up a point that a woman made in the audience over there. South Korea has one of the highest suicide rates within high school students, and you cannot just simply look at another nation with rose-tinted glasses based on facts and figures and statistics. Having taught English in South Korea for 4 years, I can actually tell you it was really distressing to see the amount of competition that students were taught to, to utilise in everyday life, the stress that they were put under. There was students who were 10 years old would come back home at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, being in private tuition up until then. It was really unhealthy and really quite distressing to witness. So we can't just look at another nation with rose-tinted glasses. We've got to look at everything.
But were you expected to put them under pressure too, as an English teacher?
Well, I taught in a state school, so there wasn't that much pressure on me, and most of the emphasis on their education is actually, well, it's normal for a South Korean child to go to a private institution and go and get after-school lessons up until about 11 o'clock at night, and this is this starts at about 8 years old, and it's really quite serious.
And it puts into perspective, I think, this kind of notion of that competition is necessarily good, because I absolutely take your point that there'd be some kids who would go back home at the end of term shamed by their position at the bottom of the ladder and determined to do better. But we also know there were other kids who came back home devastated by their position at the bottom of the ladder and never could ever get back into that subject again. And it doesn't always work the same way.
Danny, yes,
I was just going to say, the lady in the fourth row there, I think, made a very important point, because too often we just allow and tolerate these gaps in attainment to emerge at a very young age. I think your point about investing in kids when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, that's the most important time, because once that gap emerges, the history of our education system shows it never gets put back together again. I think investing in kids at a young age with a high-quality education is the best way to make sure that every child has the best start in life, and that's the way to get a fairer society.
Do you agree with him?
I do agree with Danny, but what I would say is that although you know, childhood suicide is obviously wrong, we have some lessons to learn. Yes. I mean, you can't have a situation where we say, you know, we don't want to put you under stress, we don't want you to compete. In the real world, you compete. I mean, I compete with 1,000 people for one job. I work till 11 o'clock at night. So the whole purpose of education is to prepare them for real life. Now, I'm sorry, I don't believe we can cover our children from what life is really going to be like.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you. I'll take one more point from the lady here, and then we'll move on.
Well, that's quite a few points. One is...
Can you make one?
OK, then. The competition in very young children, I don't think is very healthy. It's OK for children to know their place in a class. I'm a primary teacher, and if children know their place in a class, it's great if they've got the academic ability to get near the top. But if they haven't, and they're constantly at the bottom, or in the bottom 5 in a class, year after year, that is no way that's good for them. That is so demoralising.
So what do you do if they are in the bottom 5?
Well, you give them as much extra help as you can, but a lot of them don't have their parental support.
But are you against what she was saying about children knowing their place? I mean, she said
I am against it. It would be nicer if they didn't.
So you wouldn't tell them where they were?
I'd like to keep them closeted
so
for a little while.
So you wouldn't make one top
life's painful enough when they're older, but when they're young, I just...
But her point is life's painful enough, you've got to make it painful early on. That's...
No, not at all.
Let them learn.
It depends what result you want. If you want these people to become productive, interesting members of the community in whichever way they're going to contribute, making them feel failures at the age of 5 is not a great way to start.
All right, we must go on because we're very interesting.